from Bangkok, Thailand. I'm going to give you guys a moment to just come on in, get comfortable, and we're going to begin our episode shortly. Please drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. If you came last week and you told us where you're watching from, please do it again. We want to see how many people around the world this is reaching, and also we want to know where you're coming from. Good morning for those of you in Asia. Good afternoon, or yeah, good afternoon, evening-ish for those of you watching in the West. Alrighty, as we wait for people to come in, I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys some events happening in Ebony Expats this week. First of all, we have daily yoga with Tori J that happens every weeknight. You can find that on the Ebony Expats events page. We do a whole bunch of things within this community to keep us collected and together in these times. We include things like Friday night jam sessions, self-care Sundays, game nights on Mondays, in addition to a whole bunch of other events. So you can catch that at Ebony Expats event page. Okay, I'll just allow for a couple more minutes for people to come in. How are you guys? What's your morning drink or your morning like Alexa? Are you a coffee people or tea people? I always drink this apple cider vinegar and lime tea. I dislike it very much. But it's very good for you. Alrighty. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started as people come in. My name's Liana Freeman. I'm the political correspondent and comedian here at Ebony Expats News. We're here to keep you updated, informed, and empowered through a global connection of Black travelers and expats. We welcome you to week 4 or week 5 of quarantine. I hope you're adjusting to your new digital form of self-expression. For some of us, I think it's even been longer than that. Some of us are even like in our 8th week for whatever reason. So yeah, it's been another insightful week shedding light into these dark corners. While countries like the United States remain as calm and collected as Black Friday at Walmart, other countries are prepared to address the power vacuum caused by coronavirus and gear up to be the next global superpower. So stay tuned. In this episode, we're going to do 3 things. First, we're going to bring you international news as it pertains to the Black experience abroad. And then we're going to update you with the ongoing situation in Guangzhou, China, and show you how you can help empower Black travelers and expats in Guangzhou, China from the comfort of your own home. And that is what we call naked activism. And lastly, we're going to hear from a Black expat who's been living in China for a number of years who will lend us his firsthand experience to the current situation at hand. All right, so since this is quite a large episode, let's just go ahead and dive right into it. Alrighty, so this week seemed a little bit less dense in regards to the news, and I feel like there's just a larger feeling of adjustment to our shared personality. Conversations around the world are starting to go on about when to reopen in the government and how that will happen, sparking enthusiasm in some of us, but with a large helping of anxiety as we're not quite sure how this will unfold. As Black travelers and expats, we're definitely approaching a wave of systemic changes in the countries that we're actually residing in. Many nations have been gracious enough to grant visa extensions or exemptions, or even become a little bit lax on immigration policies, while international governments remain to be shut down and travel has come to a complete halt. As things return to normal, though, we are preparing ourselves for somewhat of an uphill battle as countries sort through and try to implement things that haven't been done before, or just address the aftermath of hasty decisions. Hey, hello, Andre. Welcome. Good morning. The hasty decisions made to kind of ease the public and deal with the aftermath in that. But something that we're definitely bonded in is the fact that all of our societies have been forever transformed. So right now, I want us to take a look into how countries have tried to approach this unprecedented future. So this starts with our news around the world. Let's get into it right with Japan. So Japan seeks to address the manufacturing halt by China through a new stimulus package. According to Al Jazeera, Japan has invested $2.2 billion, billion with a B, over a trillion Japanese yen, into diverting production from China. Even though China is Japan's largest trading partner by far, production has been cut in half since February, leaving Japan to question its relationship with the Eastern superpower. Military disputes over Japanese land in the eastern China Sea, coupled with coupled with the feeling of Japanese people wanting to cast blame at China for its mishandling of the response, has come together to create somewhat of a precarious situation. This comes just after it's speculated that both Thailand and Vietnam may also be looking for manufacturing alternatives. This particular news is special because it addresses the long question, or a question that should have been asked a long time ago. And that question is, to what extent does it impact world economies to have the majority of manufacturing and the majority of production centralized in one single country? Pre-coronavirus, we could have said, to what extent, if any. But I want to note that only in capitalism is it completely acceptable to ghost your long-term trading partner for the opportunity to excel past them. So we'll see what goes on there. Alrighty, in other news, protesters hit the street in the United States capital of Washington, D.C., which sparked numerous protests nationwide as citizens petitioned their government to reopen businesses and end the shutdown. Despite the fact that statistically some people went home with the deadly souvenir coronavirus, protesters have faced little backlash as they violated state social distancing orders. Florida has even reopened some of its beaches after seeing the highest spike in COVID-19 cases. In the midst of all of this, Fox News turned to the only doctors with comparable levels of morale and integrity to Donald Trump. They called on TV show doctors and stars Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil. Dr. Oz stunningly made the admission that if we reopen schools now, we may only see a 2 to 3% death rate, and it's worth it from an economic point of view. This forever weakening the relationship between academia and intellect. All I have to say is, excuse me, in times of a pandemic, can we please stick to our field? I'm going to need you to stop acting like you got a degree in economics from Trump University. Our last story tonight is a victory not only for feminism, but competent global leadership. Countries like New Zealand, Iceland, Taiwan, not you, Sweden, have been acknowledged in several articles, including one from US Today, for their strong leadership, in the midst of coronavirus. It's been noted that these countries all have female prime ministers or political leaders. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern implemented a strict lockdown in March and the country has only seen 15 related COVID-19 deaths, even though the country has a population of about 5 million people. So that's really unprecedented in a positive way. Germany plans to reopen many public spaces as early as next week. Let us keep in mind that under the leadership of Angela Merkel, some 50,000 people were tested every day in the early stages of coronavirus. Alrighty, so now we're going to shift into the ongoing story in Guangzhou, China. This has definitely taken us on a ride over the last week. And so, as promised, we made this our top priority. And so, let's get back into it. So, last week we spoke about the discrimination, refusal of service, and eviction of African nationals, or even those representing the African diaspora, African American, Black British, things like of that nature. China continues to maintain that it is African nationals reinfecting the country, despite only being a 10-hour drive from Wuhan, the epicenter of coronavirus. For those of us in Thailand, we understand that Chiang Mai and Bangkok is only a 10-hour drive from each other, to give you context of just how far that is. I'm going to keep referring to China being the epicenter of the virus because there has been a large push on behalf of the Chinese political leaders to divert language away from China when talking about coronavirus. But this is very important in the attempt to stay as factual as possible. But to make good on this promise, this is some information that we found out about the ongoing cases in Guangzhou. Thank you. Okay, so we know that people are being confined to their hotels, and hotels have been turned into makeshift holding areas for African peoples, even after testing negative, which is what really, really gets me. Some people or people are not allowed to leave these hotels, and there have been cries from several communities wanting to just go home and leave China far in their rearview mirror. There have even been reports of some not even being able to make arrangements to leave the country. Chinese officials maintain the position that this isn't racially motivated at all. However, international news sources, as well as diplomats and even the United States, are not buying it. What is most striking about this story, especially as an expat living abroad and among the expats, Black expats living around the world, is the fact that this terrible miscarriage of justice has affected most working professionals in China, people who moved to China to teach English and help their youth grow professionally, entrepreneurs, business owners, and probably most heartbreakingly, students. Ugandan philanthropist Bobby Wine has offered to even airlift African and African Americans outside of or out of China, as well as other people from the diaspora. And a complete boycott has been called from China, and for Africa to sever its trade relationships with China. As more countries seek manufacturing alternatives and perhaps work to phase China out of trade routes, the country risks losing a large trading partner in Africa. Fears have been inflamed within the Black American community, wondering if there's a larger conspiracy at hand on behalf of the Chinese government to test Black bodies, as suggested by French Reporter 2 weeks ago. Although these claims are 100% unsubstantiated, memories of the Tuskegee experiment and things of the like still remain pungent and don't serve to ease minds. African communities wonder if it's possible if their relationship with China has reached a point of no return, as China has invested millions and millions of dollars throughout African nations. And all of us are kind of feeling the industry or the injury, excuse me, of systemic racism, as disproportionate amounts of Black Americans have died in urban areas, and an overall devaluing of Black suffering, while blatant racism on an international scale makes us feel even further more disenfranchised. But I do want us to remember that things like tragedy, uncertainty, and ignorance put together create a very powerful chemical cocktail that only amplifies pre-existing problems. So, a pre-existing problem, anti-blackness; pre-existing problem, racism. So these things, and by pre-existing, I mean these things were very alive and well before coronavirus, as something that probably doesn't need to be reiterated to you. But what COVID-19 is forcing us to do yet again in the midst of a pandemic is to play the defensive. But we must remember that we are a generation of creators, entrepreneurs, innovators, academics, entertainers, professionals, and we have more buying power and more political power than ever before. At the end of this video, we will actually go ahead and list numbers, email addresses, petitions, and things that you can do from your home now to help place pressure on Chinese officials to stop this senseless crusade against Black bodies. Okay, so we can help from where we are, which is the silver lining in all of this. Alrighty, so Ebony Expats, we can only do so much on the research part, as any journalist or any academic will tell you, that primary sources are where we really get into the heart of what's happening. And so, lucky for us at Ebony Expats News, we were able to contact and get in touch with a courageous Black expat who's been living in China for several years, and to add some firsthand experience to this situation and also just shed some light. Because of China's high level of security and his fear of being recorded within his hotel where he is being coercively confined, he is asked to keep his personal details confidential and only reveal his name in the general area in Africa where he's from. So let's go ahead and get started. So, this man is an expat from Western Africa. He has been working in China for a number of years on business, although he's been living in Asia for over 10 years. He cites even studying in Thailand and speaking fluent Thai. So he's definitely dedicated his life to being an expat and advancing himself outside of his country. But so he comes to China and has been living there, as I said, for several years. Um, doo, doo, doo. Excuse me, give me a moment. So we wanted to ask him just about his more crucial experiences, and we asked him to walk us through exactly what's happened. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and read the information he's provided us. Okay, so he starts by letting us know that officials have threatened hotels and landlords who house African people with fines. So of course this creates a problem just right off the bat. His landlord said that he'd need to get a corona test. However, his last trip out of the country was in January, only for a few days. A few days later, police showed up at his door with a coronavirus test, and he was instructed not to leave his apartment for 3 days until the results were back. The results came back negative a few days later, yet he still describes more police officers showing up at his door and informing him that he will be relocated to another location. Now, to add some humanness to this, if you could just imagine where you are now, if police arrived at your door, didn't tell you where you were going to go, but told you that you were in fact going to be relocated, you may have the slight inkling that this is coronavirus related, but you're thinking to yourself, I tested negative, so what's the problem? So he said he arrives to the hotel anxious and sweating, and he also sends us a video of when they arrived to the hotel. He makes sure to note that they were not allowed to come through the front doors of the hotel, but only through the parking lot. And as they're being paraded through this parking lot to go into the hotel, they're greeted with people in full PPE, masks, the headwear, shoe wear, and we actually have a video of that all. Initially, they were given the opportunity to do. Oh, actually, this video is coming right in.
That's your preference.
Okay, so that's one video of his just day-to-day life as he's not allowed to leave his hotel room. But there is also another video that will show that kind of shows them arriving to the hotel. Um, but as far as his everyday life, he talks about arriving and being told by officials that if they were willing to give a blood sample, they could get out of quarantine even faster. But everyone refused. And here's this video loading up now. So you're removed from your home, you're brought to this basically like parking garage, and to your room you go. He says that he's been held in a hotel against his will despite being tested negative for coronavirus for about 11 days now. When he asked for clarification as to why he's being held there, he was simply told, and this is a direct quote, this is a place for Black people. He says that they're being served meals 3 times a day to their room, but the security is so tight at the hotel that they're not even allowed to go to the lobby to pick up food if they were to order it or to leave their hotel at all. He also notes that that there's no AC in this hotel despite it being hot, and when he asked about it, he was simply told quarantine does not require AC. Now, for those of us who live in Southeast Asia, or just live in a country that's hot in general, imagine this nightmare now compounded by the fact that you have to sit and be hot. That really struck home for me because my AC bill is probably the highest of all my bills. I just couldn't imagine. Alrighty, then he goes on to mention that a lot of the people there don't eat Chinese food for varying reasons. And so if you try to order your food, and despite the time that you ordered it, it's only delivered at 7 p.m. every day, and people are not even allowed to go to the lobby, even though these people have been tested negative, or him in this case has been tested negative. In this hotel, he notes that there are under 50 people, but that it's not something that's just happening in Guangzhou. It's apparently happening in Foshan and Dongguang, and there are many, many hotels holding Black people and not allowing them, or by Black people, African nationals, those from the African diaspora, and not being able to go before their quarantine time. So, Ebony Expats wanted to just follow up with a few questions that I know that are all on our mind. And so, for these questions, I will go ahead and take direct quotes. So, give me a moment here. Okay, so the first question we asked him, which was about the relationship between Black expats and Chinese locals, and he said, and I quote, um, "They are racist and timid people. We all know that there are racists everywhere, but here they show it to your face and make you want to cry with their behavior towards you as a Black person. Sometimes when you walk through the streets, Chinese people, or Chinese, he, she, will spit on the ground and say something you don't understand. They take pictures of you, point fingers at you, and laugh. Um, these type of humiliating attitudes." So the next question that we asked him was, could he explain the context surrounding a viral video that was casted as a Black male beating a Chinese woman, but in the video we can see that it is a Chinese man beating a Chinese woman, and how this situation, or how this video in particular, negatively impacted Black expats. And so he reports that there was a type of rumor where it was said that it was a Black male in this video beating a Chinese woman. But if you were to watch the video yourself, as Ebony Expats was able to get a hold of that video, it shows that there are no people of African descent involved in that assault, but it certainly made things worse for people in Guangzhou. The last thing we wanted to ask was just the same as we asked in our interview last week: is what advice can you give travelers and expats who are interested in this region, interested in working, traveling, or studying in China? And despite his experience, he credits China with being a good place to live outside of racism, a very safe place to live. And so, despite the trauma of this entire situation, he's still able to separate his experiences miraculously to the experience of the average person living and working in China. Again, we want to give a very, very big thank you here at Ebony Expats to Valentine for making these videos available for us, and for just sitting down and granting his time to just really show us how bad it is and how much our activism from the outside is really needed. We're so lucky to live in a digital age. We're so lucky to be able to just use our fingers. Our keyboard warrioring. I don't think that's a word, but yeah, act as keyboard warriors, and we're going to again share with some information. You can email the U.S. State Consulate in Guangzhou. Oh, we actually have a video coming up now. I'll resume in a moment, which shows the police outside guarding the hotel where our source is staying. There we have it. But yes, some actions you can do include tweeting to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo about this issue with this particular hashtag that we'll put in the description. You can send an email to the U.S. State Consulate in Guangzhou. You can call the U.S. State Department Crisis Hotline, which will provide you the number for that, and as well as signing a petition. So there are some things we can do, and we just want to say that we stand in solidarity with the Black expats, Black travelers in China, and we will all stand together in this. So this actually concludes our episode of Ebony Expats News. Please, we're very interested in not only your experiences, we're experiences from all black expats around the world, but also your takeaways from this particular video, any reactions, or anything of that nature, as we will continue to discuss it in the comments. Thank you so much. Yes, please drop a one if you find this is helpful, and we will be back with you next week to bring some updates on this story as well as news from around the world. This has been Ebony Expats News. Remember to check out our event pages if you want to stay connected with the community. I'm Liana, and I'll see you next week.